Welcome back to the High Ground podcast. I have been on a brief hiatus because I got COVID and then life happened. Went to D23. A lot of stuff was popping off recently. But yeah, we are back and I have an awesome guest who I've been looking forward to speaking to for a while because he's a beacon of light in the Nazi-filled cesspool we call Twitter. If you want to introduce yourself and let us know who you are, where we can find your content, and how you got into Star Wars.
Absolutely. First off, thank you so much for that. I know that some sides of Star Wars Twitter are not fun to be on. It's not great, but I appreciate you saying that. My name is Jacob. I have a channel called Lightspeed where I talk about all things Star Wars. You may know me from Twitter where my handle is just at JTimSuggs or Jacob on there as well. And as to how I got into Star Wars, I had a feeling this question was coming. So I brought something with me to kind of talk about that too. My mom actually got me into Star Wars whenever I was a really little kid. My dad was away on a trip, and I remember my mom we woke up that morning, and she just told me about Star Wars. I don't even know what brought it up. I don't remember any of the context, but she told me about Star Wars, and little 3-4-year-old me was like, whoa, this sounds kind of interesting. And later that day, we went to a Walmart, and she got me an R2-D2 action figure. More specifically, this one right here was the first thing I ever got in my collection, and my mom got me into Star Wars. So I always give her a shout out. It's funny because my dad is always like, I never get any recognition for getting you into Star Wars because we watched a few of them together.
You don't deserve it. That's why.
I was like, well, she bought me the R2-D2, so
yeah.
But unfortunately, Dad's bank account was also drained as soon as I got into Star Wars. But they got me into Star Wars, more specifically my mom. And I've been a fan ever since. I'm one of the crazy people that loves every single one, or at least I find something to appreciate about all of the projects, and it really means a lot to me. Maybe even more so now as an adult.
Yeah, and it's one is a bad thing to enjoy Star Wars. I don't know. It's a weird concept, but yeah, it's cool though, because I have a similar story, right? It was my mom that got me into Star Wars because she was always a closet nerd. My dad was very much not. My mom is a major Trekkie and talks very inappropriately about Captain Picard. It's like, I'm a child. I don't hear this. But yeah, we had an old VHS tape of The Empire Strikes Back, and I watched that thing into the ground. I watched that thing until it broke, and then got to experience the special editions as they released in theaters. So it was really just perfect timing for me. It was kismet, but that's awesome. All right, so you can find something to appreciate in all of Star Wars, is what you said. So I'm gonna make you. I'm gonna test that a little bit. All right.
All right.
First question is this 2-part question. What is your favorite thing and your least favorite Star Wars project? And then what is your least favorite thing and your favorite Star Wars project?
Oh man, that is a great question. Okay, I'll start with the favorite. And if you need time,
let me know because I can jump in and vamp if you need more time to think.
It's okay. I know from the get-go one thing. So my favorite Star Wars movie is kind of tied between two. It's two that most people, you either love one and don't like the other, or vice versa. My favorite Star Wars movies are tied, believe it or not, as The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. I love both of those movies for different reasons. I think that The Last Jedi thematically is just so profound. And I think that The Rise of Skywalker, it's just the perfect amalgamation of all the pulpy, weird, fun, adventurous spirit kind of things that we like to see in Star Wars projects. So I tend to love both of those movies for different reasons, and they've always kind of been tied as my favorite. Whenever they were released, I just kind of flip-flopped from there. But the first thing that pops in my head, I'll use Rise of Skywalker here. Really love that movie a lot. However, the one scene after they fall into the sinking field in Pisana, and it cuts back to the Resistance base. Normally, J.J. Abrams' humor works really well, but that one cutaway part to where Leia's like, I need you to be more optimistic, Snap Wexley. And Snap Wexley's like, oh, the Falcon isn't responding. This is wonderful news. This is great. And Rose just kind of sighs and walks away. That is one comedic bit that, as much as I love that movie, and I know I might be in the minority there, As much as I love that movie, that bit just does not work for me. I think it falls flat, and it's really weird because I think that a lot of other comedic elements in that movie work really well. Like when C-3PO is talking to the stormtrooper in gibberish, and the stormtrooper's like, "That's not even a language,"
I
which is
was
really funny, and no one talks about it.
So we have a close friend of the channel. It's Xanthi, Star Wars Music Minute. Definitely check them out. But both myself and Element 7 are on an episode. What they do is they take Star Wars, they go through all Star Wars and 5 minutes at a time and just examine the music and themes of that 5 minute section. And so we got that section. We recorded it last week and I totally forgot about that part. But like, Rise of Skywalker is C-3PO's movie. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like he never had a better performance than throughout that entire film. I don't know. It was that is my favorite part. I mean, it is my least favorite of the films, but as a friend of the channel brought out, like it's so much like a comic book. You know what I mean? When you're
It
just
really
like
is.
you're doing the swashbuckling, you're doing the adventure, and like so there's a lot of really good and really cool creative nuggets in there. But sorry, go ahead, continue.
Oh, no, no. Absolutely. I like how you said that. I've never thought of it that way, but it really is very comic booky. It takes so much from like Dark Empire and the weird these stories of Star Wars in a lot of ways too. And maybe that's why I appreciate it, because whenever I saw Rise of Skywalker, I liked it, but I didn't love it. And it took a while for me to be like, you know what? Like, this is actually great. And a little bit of also being like, okay, I'm not in denial. I'm actually really enjoying this movie a lot. And every single time that I've watched it or shown it to a friend, I just find something else to really enjoy about it. And I think that, like, as much as I think The Last Jedi is the better movie, if I was stranded on a desert island and only had to pick one, I might pick Rise of Skywalker instead. But as for my favorite
It's
thing about my least favorite, oh no, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say
I didn't mean to.
it's steak and tacos. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah.
yes, a nice steak is very great to have from time to time. Sometimes you just want tacos, though. You know?
Honestly, and there's nothing wrong with that. My friend called it like the Raising Cane's box of Star Wars
Mhm.
movies because it has like a little bit of everything. And you might be too full by the end, but you still enjoyed it. And every time I think about that, I think of that. But as for my favorite thing about my least favorite Star Wars movie, and I say least favorite very hesitantly because I still really enjoy this movie a lot, especially because it just had its 25th anniversary. But I think that The Phantom Menace is probably my least favorite if I had to like pick one. I almost said the Clone Wars animated film, but I feel like if we're sticking with the saga films, I'm gonna pick
Yeah.
that one. I guess my favorite thing about the Phantom Menace, um, I love the music of Phantom Menace. I think the Phantom Menace arguably might have the best Star Wars score, or maybe one of them. John Williams, it doesn't even need to be said, but he's such a
Hmm.
genius when it comes to Star Wars scores and just movie and film scores in general. His legacy is so incredible. And I think that Phantom Menace, for all of the hate that I got for so many years, no one on earth was saying the music of that movie was bad. And I think that the music just makes the themes of the movie so much more impactful and profound. And I think that whenever you combine that with like the world building and like the practicality of Phantom Menace, because there's still a lot of practicality in the midst of all of like the digital effects that some hold up, some are Watto. But I think that the music, if I had to say one thing about Phantom Menace that I think is actually phenomenal, it's probably the music.
Uh, and on that note, I will say a lot of what the Phantom Menace gets like hate for, as far as CG and the prequels in general. Oftentimes, it's not actually CG; it's the art direction that people don't like, and they just
Yeah.
don't know the difference. You're like, yes, this background is CG'd, but or this background was added in post, but that's a matte painting or that is a miniature set. Like that is
Mhm.
not computer generated. You just don't like the art direction that they went with for this thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, the music is absolutely top tier, and like having a Star Wars theme with vocals in Sanskrit that
I
say
know.
nothing, but like who yeah, he was definitely cooking, and especially how it plays with silences when the places where it chooses not to have music as well, like
Mhm.
do an entire pod race where the only music is at the tail end of the third lap, and they showed all three laps. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but I love the pod
Oh no,
racing
I
scene
love it too.
so much.
The sound design in that sequence, Matthew Wood and all of them did such an incredible job. The sounds, like sometimes like I just hear it in my head. Maybe it's my ADHD, I don't know. But I just hear the sounds, the rumbles and everything of the pod racers, like they're just forever embedded in my memory. They're so good. I'm with you.
Even as a child, I was like, I want to do sound design. I don't even know what it is, but I want it. You know what I mean? Like, it made me interested in that. Also, granted, that was roughly the time period where surround sound speakers were becoming a thing. So that also might be why it's memorable. You know, but yeah, that's cool. I like that a lot. If I were to do the same, you know, my favorite Star Wars film is The Last Jedi. I
Nice.
toggle back and forth between Last Jedi and Empire. Um, and Star Wars can be so many different things, but you'll find like I really love the things that are kind of serious and that play with perspective. Like just in general, that's like my MO for everything. There BB-8 related humor bits that I just didn't get in that film. But specifically in The Last Jedi, there is a scene where BB-8 is like driving the walker and like the top rips off, so it's just him on it.
Yeah.
And I would have hated that scene more had John Boyega's face not looked exactly like mine did in the theater of like, what?
It's like when he does like the
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, so it's ridiculous by his standards too. Gotcha. I'm
well,
cool. We're in it. We're in it.
not to interrupt, but I remember that scene and I'm haunted by that scene because I love Lego Star Wars. You can see that behind me. I got back into collecting it back in like 2020, and there was a Lego set for The Last Jedi, and people got mad because it was a First Order walker, but it was missing the top part. The set is literally just the bottom part, and BB-8 just flops on the top. So they sold it for like full price, like a normal walker, but you're missing like arguably the most important part. So the set just felt incomplete, and a ton of people in the community were mad about it. Like even people who liked the movie and loved the movie were like, "Come on, like we could have had like a feature to pop that off." But it's ridiculous. But I know what
That's
scene you're
just
talking
business
about.
savvy. Yeah. Now, also earlier in the film where BB-8 is like fixing electric leaks in the X-wing and then just jams his whole head plate into it, and I'm like, I don't understand what's happening here, but whatever, it is what it is. Then we got some Tokyo drifting in space, which I freaking
Uh,
love. Listen, to anyone who was upset at that scene, like that's the closest we have to Newtonian physics, like actually exists in space. So like I don't know, it's weird. That being said, the opposite, um, least favorite does end up being Rise of Skywalker. Sorry about that,
that's all good.
but
No worries.
you know, although after seeing it in theaters, my least favorite for the majority of the time was actually Rogue One. I don't talk about that a lot because people get mad, but
People get really defensive for Rogue One.
yeah, there was a. It wasn't until I started doing these podcasts and talking to people who loved it that when I got to rewatch it, I got to see what they loved, and it bumped it up quite a bit. No, but a lot of the design Rise of Skywalker is freaking phenomenal. You know, and especially the connection between Rey and Kylo that we built up in the Force Awakens, and then we got to see, you know, their Force time calls in the Last Jedi where, you know, the rain is coming. And then we got to see Kylo Ren start to use that in the third movie. And I love that clever usage. I love when they take something, they take the Force, they take something and then find a new and clever way to use it that's still within the lore. And, you know, him using that to, you know, snatch her necklace so he could figure out where she was, or, but specifically the scene where they're fighting, and he's down on Kajimi and like his lightsaber hits the thing with the berries or beans or whatever, and then like the imagery of the red spilling into the white room, like it was just really beautiful. There's there's a lot of that film is absolutely beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I'm right there with you. That fight, the Force Spawn duel on Kajimi, I never even considered that as a possibility as to where they could go. And I remember on opening night seeing it with my friend, and as soon as they started like fighting in two different locations, I was like, this is incredible. Like, this is a progression of this that I didn't even think was possible. And it still blows my mind. That duel, no one talks about it really at all, which kind of blows my mind because if we're being honest, like I might even like that duel more than the one on the Death Star wreckage on Kef Burr. Like I think it's fantastic. I love the use of like two different sets and the clever editing to kind of get around that. It's fantastic. I'm right with you. I think that a lot of designs in that movie are fantastic, and I think that at least continuing that and kind of like moving that concept and idea forward is fantastic. I love it too.
Yeah, and they also really excelled at the unique ways that people express themselves through fights. And I don't think we talk about it enough because a lot of talk about fights is about the technical aspect of it, how cool the X move was. But for me, especially because I come from the Star Wars books, right? That was always my bread and butter. And that was the thing that sold me was hearing about how the fights were just an expression of each individual character and their beliefs and all this stuff. And a sword fight is not just like a cool action scene, it is where two different ideologies clash. And afterwards, there is something has to change, right? And so that was another thing that I thought that they did really well, especially when you see Kylo Ren turn back into Ben at the end of the movie and he
Mm-hmm.
fights completely different. And yeah, they ate a bit on that one as well.
They did. That's one of my favorite
Uh,
parts.
I do wish he had said more than just "ow," but
Yeah,
that's neither here
well,
nor there.
I don't know if I'm correct on this. I could be wrong. I'm gonna put on my tinfoil conspiracy theory hat for a minute. The scene where after he heals Rey and he like falls down, it looks like that scene is reversed, which means it looks like there was dialogue and she was either pulling him up or something like that. Maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe I'm seeing this scene wrong. But to me, it's always looked reversed. And so it just makes me wonder, was there something else there that they cut? There has to be, but I don't know. I think
Yeah,
that someone said this a long time ago on Twitter. I don't want to take credit for this, but someone said it's to them they liked it without dialogue and him just saying ow and that's it. The reason that they kind of defended it and the reason why they said that they were okay with it is because actions speak louder than words. So Ben Solo's final act is saving Rey and giving her the Skywalker legacy and kind of using it as an act of selflessness to save her and carry on that legacy made it a lot more interesting and profound to them. And I've always kind of agreed with that, though I do think that there has to be a deleted scene. It's wild that we don't even have the deleted scenes from that movie. Like, it's been 5
yeah.
years. JJ, I am begging you, please drop them up if you can.
Release the JJ cut.
Release the JJ cut.
Listen. There's like a solid hour before the movie even starts where we get Eye of Webbish Bog and we get all the kinds of crazy stuff going on. And Star Wars is best
Mm-hmm.
when it's
I agree.
you know as far as that scene, like we were talking about like what should he have said or is silence the best thing? Because my mind, I could only think of it being really cringy of like him. I mean, he's like, "Hey," you know, and then so what I settled on is, and it's a cop out. I fully admit that. Would have what I'm trying to vocalize, but not really saying anything, and being like, and then Ray being like, "I know," and then like that's the last
Ah,
thing,
that would
and
be
then you're
so
like,
cool.
"Yeah." That's what I want.
I like that a lot.
That and Lucasfilm. If you're watching this, give me a novel. I want a book. I want a novel, and all the novel is it's the sequel trilogy from Ben's perspective, from Kylo Ren's perspective.
Ooh,
All the
interesting.
scenes where we were following Rey, I want to know what was happening on over there on their Star Destroyers, or I want to hear what's in his head when he's talking to Snoke and having to hide his emotions. I want that internal dialogue, but also I want to make sure that it expands on the things that got cut out. The whole Eye of Weber Spock stuff, the whole interrogation of Chewbacca, where he looks into Chewie's mind and sees Chewie raising him and like teaching him to shoot and all that stuff. Give me it. Give me that.
So it's funny you mentioned this, and I guess spoilers for upcoming Lightspeed videos. I've written the script. I'm working on a video that might be up like next week, actually, about the deleted scenes from Rise of Skywalker, what we know, what we don't know, kind of like everything that I kind of want to discuss that was potentially cut from the movie, or elements that we have that we don't have, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The good news is that in the novelization by Ray Carson, some of those deleted scenes make it in. And in the novelization, the structure of the movie is a little bit different. Like it starts off with Luke and Leia training in like a flashback on Agent Gloss, kind of like we see later on in the movie, but there's a little bit more to it. And then I think it jumps into Rey training, and then it's like Kylo Ren, and then it's Poe and Finn and them finding about the stuff from Bulio. So it's interesting that the structure in the book is different than it is in the movie, but I'm kind of glad that we have the novelization for that, because I've always told people this. Star Wars movies, like you might think that some are more inconsistent with others and things like that. The Star Wars novelizations of the movies are fantastic, especially Revenge of the Sith, which is technically Legends by this point, but that novelization is out of this world levels good. But if you want to give like Star Wars a second chance, maybe your least favorite project or something, read the novelization, because the novelizations add a lot more to the story, and 9 out of 10 times they're canon still, so you can still kind of take stuff from them and kind of maybe interpret the films a little bit differently too, which you don't have to read a book to understand a movie, but if you want a different perspective, or you want to dig deeper into a story that you love, or maybe don't love as much, I always recommend that, because I think the novelizations are usually absolutely, they knock it out the park.
Yeah, 1,000%, especially Revenge of the Sith, like you mentioned, that one. Even if Revenge of the Sith is your favorite Star Wars film, read the novelization and it'll be 2 to 3 times better.
Yeah.
There's
it's a so scene, sad though.
There's a scene in it where Obi-Wan Kenobi pretends to be a hunchbacked, slack-jawed, like weird person holding, and he's like, I found a Jedi baby, and he has like Yoda in a dirty bundle, and the clone troop is like, that's the ugliest baby I've ever seen, and then they just murder everyone. It's the best.
I wish they would have kept it in the movie, or put that in the movie. It would have been great. The memes of that would have been incredible. The prequel memes would have come like decades prior, had that happen.
Right? It's interesting. So how do you feel about the resurgence of the prequels? Because they were not in a good state for a very, very long time, and that's a very public thing as well. Yeah. Like you can't, I was someone who always enjoyed them, but I'm not gonna lie, I did badmouth them a little bit, just because I swear to God, I thought I was the only person on the planet that enjoyed them.
I did too. I'm with you. I guess for me, I didn't know if you were finished or not. I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh yeah, no. What's your take? Was it the memes that took off? Was it just the kids getting older? Were the movies better than we thought they were? Are the movies still bad and we just don't care? What do you think?
I think that when the prequels came out, so first off, I guess I should say, very nostalgic for those movies. Almost too nostalgic, because they were always on in my house. We talked earlier about how you had the VHS tape of Empire, and I remember not long after I got that R2-D2 toy, we had the original trilogy on DVD. So I watched all 3 of those movies. I loved them. And I remember we would go to Blockbuster all the time to rent Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, because at the time Revenge of the Sith hadn't come out yet. So we would rent those 2 movies all the time. And it got to the point to where one time I was in Target out of town with my parents, and I was looking at like the DVDs. I was like 6 or 7 by this point. And I saw the DVDs for the prequels, and my dad was like Jacob, no, like let's just keep going. And I remember I looked at my parents and like little 7-year-old me didn't think much of this, but I was like, but if we get the movies now, then we don't have to keep renting them from Blockbuster and Hollywood Video. And I remember my mom looked at my dad, and my dad looked at my mom, and we bought both of those movies right then and there. I think 7-year-old me struck the deal of the century with that. But I'm very nostalgic for those movies. I say all that to say this. I love them to death. I had all the toys. I'm very nostalgic for all of the prequel stuff in the Clone Wars, much like many other people my age and our age. That all being said, I don't think that they're without their faults. However, I think that whenever they originally were released, for a lot of people, there was a lot of hype leading up to Phantom Menace, like a lot of undeniable hype. The
Yeah.
first Star Wars movie in like a decade, really. And I think that when Phantom Menace came out and it was so different than what people expected, I think that kind of struck a nerve in a lot of people. And because it was like the first time that really happened outside of the original trilogy, it kind of just amplified it by a million, you know? And I think that in the years since episodes 1, 2, and 3 have been released, I think they've gained more of an appreciation for a few reasons. One, those kids grew up and they had a voice. For many years, you had a lot of older fans not like the prequels, and they were very loud about it. Even though critics liked Attack of the Clones and they really liked Revenge of the Sith, fans were always kind of iffy, and Revenge of the Sith was always like the odd one out. But I think the kids that grew up with those movies, eventually we hit a point to where those kids were now online and they were teenagers and they could talk about why they liked the movies. And I think the memes and kind of joking around with the movies a little bit, like even the worst elements of those movies, it kind of brought like that nostalgia out full force. And I think that seeing a lot of people appreciate those movies a lot more, and the fact that they had aged about a decade by that point, if not a little bit more, I think that they just kind of have aged a lot better because people are laughing at them for better or for worse, but they're kind of just acknowledging, like, you know what? Those movies were made by somebody who genuinely cared. And now I feel like we're seeing a repeat thing with the sequels. And, you know, even when The Force Awakens was coming out, people were still iffy on the prequels. This prequel revisionism is still relatively new, in my opinion. It didn't really happen until, to be blunt, after The Last Jedi came out, from what I really remember. Which sucks because that's my favorite, or tied as my favorite Star Wars movie. But I guess to me, it's like those kids grew up, and I think that older fans, seeing those kids be very vocal on social media and different platforms, I think that people finally came to realize, like, you know what, like, there's a lot of artistic passion put into these movies. And I think that a lot of people point at Disney and they say they're just a soulless corporation that doesn't care about art and stuff. I'm not going to entirely deny that, but at the same time, I think that the new Star Wars movies with J.J. Abrams directing, Rian Johnson directing, Gareth Edwards, and Ron Howard, and everyone who's done The Mandalorian and all the shows, I think that at the end of the day, when you watch those projects, they feel like projects made by people compared to other things that Disney makes. So I think that in the future, as we kind of move on, I think that we'll kind of see the same effect. Because unfortunately, I feel like a lot of very loud people in the fandom tend to hate whatever is new. And then a couple years later, they start to kind of come around to it. And then a couple more years later, they really enjoy it. It can do no bad. It's not wrong in any sense of the word. And then they hate whatever else is new. And I feel like it's a cycle that started with Empire Strikes Back and then Jedi, the prequels, the sequels. Not to get too off track, but I think they've gained more of an appreciation just because they've aged and because they're older, more kids are nostalgic for them. They've grown up. They can show those movies to friends and family, kids even. So I think that there's a lot of reasons as to why they've aged better, but I also just am in the camp that I think that all three of them rock. I really do. So that's a very long way of me getting to that.
Well, it's also, I mean, also another part of it I do want to shout out is just the extended media, right? Because we got a lot of stuff where something that was a hole, a hole, not a plot hole, because God damn it, do I hate. So sorry, very few times when people say plot hole is it actually a plot hole. It's honest. It's always just like a
Yeah.
question they have, and they personally don't know the answer. But there were so many things that got filled in by books and comics and by all this other meaning. Like as a person, I'm 150 Legends books deep and like almost all a canon, and so there's all these like weird little, if you read MedStar, like you find out about this, which those books were actually really good,
Hmm.
and that along with the Clone Wars kind of filling out some of the stuff, because when you, at least personally, I remember one of the big critiques for the prequels was the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. They don't really interact in the first movie, pretty much at all, and in the second one, it's just constant irritation.
Yeah.
Which I absolutely love how sassy Obi-Wan is that entire movie of like, I came to rescue you, master. Good job.
Yeah.
It's the best. But then you get to actually flesh out the relationship in these other books and in the Clone Wars and all this stuff. And so you actually feel the separation. You feel the loss a lot more. And I think that
Yeah.
adds to the emotion, the emotionality of the character. So you know, um, Anakin and Padme getting together felt really. It was fairly quick. It was like he's
Yeah.
annoying, but he's really hot. So I game on, I guess. But I don't know. I also though am in the camp that I just enjoy these movies. I've always loved Attack of the Clones. By the way, it's
Yeah.
such a.
Finally, someone else. Someone else. It might be my
Oh,
favorite.
listen, I'm obsessed with Dexter Jettster. Always have been, always will be, and I love that the High Republic has been fleshing him out like a lot.
Yeah.
Because you knew he was a total badass. Like he runs a '50s diner on Coruscant, but he knows stuff that's been deleted from the Jedi archives. You know what I mean? Like he's like,
Yeah.
how does he know? How does he recognize a Kaminoan saber dart off of sight
It's
for
like
like 1 second?
he
Who is this man?
he's the one guy that knows, even when the Jedi Temple droids don't know what's going on. And so the fact
Yeah.
that they've made him like a canonical prospector is the coolest route they could have picked, in my opinion. I think it's great. I love it.
I still want like a separate show where he's like on Coruscant cooking, but like in reality he keeps all the gangs at bay and like keeps the diner open as a place where people can be like safe from all this stuff. So he's actually interwoven into like the tapestry of the underworld of like, no, you don't come over on this territory because Dexter Jettster lived like Luke Cage, but it's Dexter Jettster is what I'm picturing.
I love that. That's
I know.
great.
I think we could get there.
His food is like the one thing that all of the crime syndicates and criminal underbelly can like get behind. They're like, you know what? Like without Dexter Jettster's like specials, we would be at war with each other. Which makes perfect sense as to why later on they do have a war with each other because the diner is no more.
Exactly. He was holding together the galaxy. We found the balance of the Force.
Have you read Brotherhood by Mike Chen?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't want to spoil it, but I guess now I kind of already have with what we're talking about. When Dexter Jettster showed up in that book, I was not expecting that at all. And it just kind of made like I listened to the audiobook and the guy who does it does like the voices and stuff. And it's so good. I did not expect that. I love that they just mentioned that he like eats all of his leftovers, like his cake and stuff while he's helping out Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I love that they're really fleshing out his character and having fun with it.
Also, swear to God, you never see Obi-Wan happier than when he talks to Dexter Jettster. That's the happiest that man has ever been. All right. So speaking of which, what do you think? So we're talking about kind of the nostalgia aspect, but I feel like Star Wars is in a weird place because we have this push and pull of it feels like one group of people, Star Wars is this one thing and it can never stray from this thing and it has to be that thing. For another group, Star Wars is the feeling we had as kids watching it. And for others, Star Wars is a vast sandbox that you could do anything in. And it feels like those groups will always be at kind of at war with each other. Or how does this,
Yeah.
one of the things I've been seeing people say that I vehemently disagree with was that the success of Wolverine and Deadpool, and they're like, that's what Star Wars needs to do. And I'm like, I really enjoyed that movie. Its writing was very bad, and
I'm with you.
I don't know. What do you think? You kind of feel what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah.
What do you think? Where do we land on
Man,
nostalgia, and what should we do?
what's weird is that, well, first off, I want to say this because you made me think about it. Whenever we're talking about how the sequels will age, the reason why I partially believe, and this kind of pertains to what we're talking about now, I guess, the reason why I feel like we haven't gotten a massive resurgence with the sequels and stuff yet, and we might next year with the 10th anniversary of Force Awakens, but I think the part of the reason why we haven't had that is because we really haven't had like a Clone Wars type show to further develop these characters and stories in this specific era. We have Resistance, but Resistance hasn't had any new episodes. It's been done since like I want to say 2019, if not
Mm-hmm.
earlier than that. So I feel like we need a show like that to really kind of bring in a new era of appreciation for those films to an extent. In terms of like what Star Wars should be, in a lot of ways, it kind of pertains to the individual, I think, and what they want from it. But at the same time, I feel like Star Wars, those groups that you mentioned, like the group that is like, it needs to be like it was in the 80s and the 70s, and the group that's like, well, it needs to have the prequel stuff, and then no, we need to move beyond that. I think what makes Star Wars great, and when Star Wars is at its best, is when it kind of combines all of those ideas into one movie, which is why I like The Last Jedi so much, and The Force Awakens, and maybe even just the sequels in general so much, because I feel like those movies, like, they handle those references and nostalgia differently because it's more like in-universe history rather than like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I clapped and I saw it, like it is with so many of these other legacy sequels. Because I feel like a lot of studios watched The Force Awakens and they saw how audiences reacted to like Han Solo and Chewbacca showing up, and they were like, we need to do that. But the problem is that they took all the wrong listens from it, and they were like, hey, what if we just like had things show up? Because Han Solo and Chewbacca in that movie are kind of supporting characters. They're not even like, I don't know if I would say main characters in The Force Awakens, because it's kind of those new
Yeah.
characters' story. So I like when Star Wars kind of has all of those ideas together. At the end of the day, you're not going to please everyone, which is why I can imagine that making a Star Wars project is kind of a nightmare because you've always got that in the back of your head. I don't care how experienced you are. Like, I know that if I was hired tomorrow by Lucasfilm to make a movie, I would be mortified. Like, I wouldn't even know where to start. But I guess at the end of the day, I would start by saying, you know what? This is why I like Star Wars. This is what I like about Star Wars. I'm going to make a Star Wars movie that I know that 6-year-old me would love. And I think that those filmmakers making these projects and these movies, I think they're really coming at it from a place of what they loved about Star Wars, which I think is really, really cool. And part of the reason why I'm very thankful that we have all of these new Star Wars projects, because The Mandalorian is not like Solo, a Star Wars story. Solo is not like Rogue One. Rogue One is not like the sequels. The sequels are not like The Acolyte. And so you've got all these different areas of Star Wars. And what's cool is that despite all of the division that you see online and all of the discourse that people will angrily comment about under tweets or posts or videos or whatever, despite all of that, there is still someone that specific project that one person hates, that is their favorite thing about Star Wars. And I've always said it, and I've heard other people say it too. Part of what makes Star Wars special is that your least favorite project is someone else's favorite, and they got
Yeah.
something out of it. And so I think that I feel like people that are like, oh, it needs to be this specific thing always, I feel like they're really thinking about this kind of backwards in the wrong way, in my opinion. Because at the end of the day, Star Wars means something to you, but it also could mean something totally different to someone else. And I feel like you have to at least recognize that. And I feel like that's where a lot of like this discourse and stuff online goes from. I feel like I'm not answering your question. I'm sorry if I'm
Oh
not.
no, no,
But
you're doing fine.
I guess just that's kind of where I'm at. I just wish that more people could realize, like, you know what, like this might not be my favorite thing in the world, or my favorite thing about this universe, but at the same time, I did like this about it. And I don't know. I feel like it's in a weird state that you can't really just pinpoint one, because if you're like, okay, we're gonna appeal to these people, you're gonna miss the mark with someone else entirely. The Force
Yeah,
Awakens only had that effect in a lot of ways because it was the first Star Wars movie in like a decade, right? A lot of people were excited for it, and The Force Awakens very much is nostalgic, and it's about what Star Wars was. And I think that for a lot of people, the reason why a lot of people did like The Last Jedi is because it kind of moved Star Wars forward a little bit. And then The Rise of Skywalker, someone else might say that it pushed them back. Some might say it kept moving them forward. I think that movie is kind of a bit of both for me personally. I don't know. I think that you're never going to be able to please everyone. And I wish that more people would realize,
and I
like, you
don't
know
think you
what?
should try.
No, not at all. I think again that if you want to make a Star Wars project, make the Star Wars project that you would have wanted to see growing up, and make the Star Wars story that you want to tell. Don't, because if you try to like go into a project, like if I'm directing a movie and I'm like, I'm making this movie for these specific people, then you're kind of losing the identity of the movie, because movies have an identity connected to the people making it. And so I feel like you can't really forget that. I feel like there's just a lot going on, and I just feel like a lot of people are so insanely hyperbolic online when it comes to this stuff, and
Yeah,
that's the most annoyingly
yeah.
frustrating part about it, because people being so
Everything is the
hyperbolic
best,
about
the
it.
greatest thing in the world, or it's the worst thing ever. It's
Yeah.
so bad it gave me lupus, and or like
Yeah,
something stupid, and then you're like,
I don't get it.
or it was okay. I don't know.
And like I feel like people have forgotten that it's okay to say it's not for me. You know, like
Yeah,
it's totally fine if a project wasn't for you, but you recognize how it could be for someone else. You know, like I really enjoyed The Acolyte. I can totally see how that show would work for everybody. You know, so I just wish that more people at least would recognize that, because I don't know. I feel like the people who are very loud in the fandom right now, and I don't want to give anybody attention or anything, really direct or indirect, so I'll make it quick. I feel like a lot of people who are very loud, they're hurting things more than they realize. Because them being so
yeah.
loud and shouting all these things like, this isn't what we want, and then they do something different and they're like, no, this isn't what we want either. It's like, then what do you want from Star Wars? Because if you only want those three movies are still going to be there. And if someone's first Star Wars movie is The Force Awakens, they're not just going to stop at The Force Awakens. Unless they really hate the movie, and then I guess maybe they probably would. But they're going to watch the other movies too. And so I guess that I just kind of wish that people would kind of more recognize that a little bit more. And this is a very long-winded answer. I'm so sorry.
No, you're totally fine. I do want to ask two-part question real quick though. So Star Wars is a big part of my life, and so there are certain quotes that have affected me and affect how I view the world, right? So I mean, but big one for me is your focus determines your reality. I think about that every single day. And I try to make sure, like, okay, well, what is my focus? Because if I'm not, like if you can't you can't hit a target you can't see, right? Like you gotta focus on something in order to head towards it. I'm curious if there's any Star Wars quotes that have touched you or affected your life, or things that you live by or recommend people give a second thought to. That's the first part. Second part is this: we have lost an icon in James Earl
Uh,
Jones. um Amazing man, amazing performer, one of the greatest voices of all time. And so I also want you to give me, if you have a favorite Vader line, or maybe even a favorite Mufasa line, or hell, Coming to
Man,
America. Do you have?
such a good one. I'll do the James Earl Jones one first. God, man, that news broke my heart. Much like many other people, I'd just gotten home. I sat on my couch. It had been a long day, and I opened my phone and saw that. And it is very rare that a celebrity passing kind of just like freezes me for like at least a minute, and I just have to like process it. But that was one of them. Carrie Fisher was really like the last one that kind of happened with. But God, like what an incredible legacy that man left. Incredible actor, incredible human. That voice is just forever iconic in so many ways. Like you said, not just beyond Star Wars, with like The Lion King and Coming to America and CNN and everything. Oh man, I guess if I had to pick a quote from Vader that really stuck out to me, I always think about the classic. I always think about "I find your lack of faith disturbing," and there's something about that. And then I also like I have altered the deal. Pray I do not alter it any further. Before he like leaves
Yeah, that's a
Lando.
great one.
That's a good one. But there's so many good Vader lines to pick. Like we would be here all night if we were just going back and forth with them. But man, I love that line so much. I know there's one from The Last Jedi. I got it. I literally had my phone here because I was trying to remember what the quote was because I knew there was one from Last Jedi that really stuck out to me. I just had a brain fart and I couldn't remember it. And it's the scene where Yoda is talking to Luke and Yoda says failure is the greatest teacher, or the greatest teacher failure is.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest reasons why I love that movie so much, because he's absolutely right, you know? People are so scared of failure and so scared of losing and failing something. And I think that movie's message being, it's okay to fail because failing is how we learn. To me, that was just so profound. And I remember in the theater, it really resonated with me. I was going through a lot when that movie came out. I was in college at the time. And I remember that the year before, I had a math class that I just was not good in. And it wasn't for lack of trying. And the professor was not great. I'm not going to name any names or anything, but there were reasons as to why they were not great. But needless to say, it was my first semester of college a year prior, and I thought I had my major and everything picked out. And I remember that I ended up changing my major, and I was so scared to do it. But I changed my major, and I also dropped out of that math class because I was like, you know what? I can't do this. I'm going to have to retake this next semester. And for months after that, just going from like an honor roll student, straight A student in high school to doing that my first semester of college, I just felt like I failed in a lot of ways, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I think that my second semester, when things were going a little bit smoother, hearing that in that movie really spoke to me, because I was like, you know what? Like, I've changed so much since I did that. And it proved to be actually a really great decision. And I ended up taking that math class again. And despite not being great at math, I ended up passing that class. So it was one of those things that hearing Yoda say that in that movie made me realize that it's okay to take a step back and learn from failure for a minute and then grow beyond that. And that's such an incredible listen. It's such an incredible line. The scene is probably one of my favorites in the saga. I love it so much, very dearly, actually.
Same. And it's funny because that was one of the scenes where, yeah, because there was a couple scenes where the thought of like bringing Anakin into the mix like occurred, but it was like Luke's relationship isn't with Anakin; it's with Yoda, and like that's why it needs to be him. And yeah, no, that line means a lot to me as well, because it encapsulates so much, especially the way it harkens back to the prequels and that to the lessons of the Jedi that unchecked Luke would repeat. You know, we all would. And it's funny because it's the more you think about it, the more applicable it comes to a lot of things. And a lot of the complaints I hear about the film, and you're like, this is answering your question. Like, you don't even understand the metatextual way that your response to this is blown out of the water by this. It's kind of funny. For me, that my Vader quotes, though, you just made me think of one of my favorite ones, too, is when he he says it with just like cheesy inflection in his voice when he double crosses Lando, and he's like, perhaps you feel you were cheated unfairly.
Yeah.
And he's like the way he says it is like so nice, but like say something again and I will choke you.
Yeah, isn't that the part where he gives him like, because you see like Lando go like that or something,
Yeah.
like he like rubs his neck after he says it. I like to think Vader gave him a little taste of the
little he has so many apology accepted, Captain Nita.
Yeah.
Like he's making fun of a man who's already dead. You know what I mean? Like, God.
He's so cool with stuff like that. You gotta appreciate Darth Vader for dropping some of the hardest roasts in the entire saga.
And it's those moments where you're like, no, that's Anakin for sure. That's
Yeah.
just Anakin entertaining himself. Okay, so yeah, I mean, in kind of wrapping up, I gotta ask, outside of Star Wars, what else are you into? What else do you have going on? And is there anything else you want to plug?
In terms of things that I like outside of Star Wars, I'm gonna say this one. Recently, I've been getting back into anime a little bit. More specifically, Naruto. I don't know if you're a Naruto fan or not. I grew up watching Naruto with. Okay, sweet. I grew up watching Naruto with my cousin, so I have really fond memories with that. And so I just started like rewatching it over the summer. It's been kind of off and on a little bit, but I do really enjoy Naruto a lot. And some other animes as well, like Ghost in the Shell and Cowboy Bebop, and just all of the famous basic ones that you've probably already known. But I'm trying to dig deeper into it. I just started watching DBZ for the first time ever, which has been a lot, but it's been fun. Which is weird because I've seen clips of it back when I would watch like Toonami on Cartoon Network, but I never like sat down to like watch it. So I've just started watching Dragon Ball, and I really like it a lot. In terms of other stuff,
and now I'm curious if Dragon Ball holds up. And by holds up, I mean like if someone like you who's never seen it watches it now, is it good? Because like I loved it, but like I think back and I'm like, I mean, Goku fought Frieza for an entire season. Like, there's a whole box set like season where it's just them fighting and him going through different transformations. Like,
it's definitely a lot from what I've kind of gathered. Like those fight scenes go on because like you'll think like, okay, this is the plot of this episode. The next one's gonna be like a fight, and then we're gonna move on. No, the next episode is just the fight, and then the next episode is the fight continued, and then it just goes on. But I kind of love it for it. And I really enjoy it a lot. In terms of other stuff that I really enjoy, I'm a big DC guy. I love DC. I like Marvel too. In terms of MCU movies, they're very hit or miss for me. But in terms of DC stuff, I really like a lot of those comics. I grew up reading DC.
Yeah. Bring
love
back Young
a lot
Justice.
of the movies. Yes, please. That show was so good.
We left on like such an epic, like, God damn.
It's just, I can't believe they did that. The old Teen Titans show, I don't know if you've seen that as well, but that show was great. The Justice League cartoon, even some of the DC projects. I know Zack Snyder fans get a bad rap, but I do love Man of Steel, BVS, and his cut of Justice League a lot. I'm not one of the crazy ones, I promise, guys, but I do really enjoy his projects a lot, and Aquaman I really enjoy too. I'm trying to think of the other ones. I'm the one person in the world that enjoyed Black Adam, so I guess there's that. But I love the Marvel stuff, the DC stuff. Oh man,
I will say this. I feel like a few of the recent movies were a really good film, but it was just the wrong film. You know what I mean? Like Black Adam had a really good Justice Society movie in it.
Yeah, it did.
That I wish I could have seen. You know what I mean? The Flash had a really good World's Finest movie in it. That I wish we could have seen.
When I say I like DC, The Flash is not the one I'm talking about. I did not let the record show. To all the people on Twitter that are always like, oh, Jacob likes everything. Jacob hates The Flash. I cannot stand the Flash movie at all. The CGI Christopher Reeve, I almost walk. I believe in respecting the film and staying there the entire time. But my God, I almost walked out of the Flash when I saw CGI Christopher Reeve pop into the frame. I was like, this is awful.
Yeah, no, I was like, oh yeah, I remember Scorpion King.
Yeah, honestly, it's so bad. How does Warner Brothers just have all this money and they can't get their CGI to look good? Granted, like I think that stuff like that is just its own category of like bad, but I think that the CGI in some of these movies is just awful, and I don't get it. Black Adam was the one to where all I wanted it to be was fun, and I just
Mm-hmm.
got a fun movie, and that's all I wanted. Superman cameo meant a lot to me, even though I knew it was coming because they spoiled it in their marketing promotion for the movie for some reason. Probably because they knew the movie was gonna make like $5. But I really liked that a lot. And then they were like, actually, we're not bringing back Henry Cavill. I was like, well, I'm gonna have to feel a little bit more sour on Black Adam now. But I love Star Wars. I love Marvel. Oh man, Lord of the Rings, big Lord of the Rings fan too. Um, I'm looking over. I
Nice.
have my movies like right here, so I'm just looking to see what I have. Indiana Jones and
Okay.
Jurassic Park too.
Are you a gamer at all?
I am. I play a lot of Halo. I love Halo. I've loved a lot of those games ever since I was a kid. Recently, at the risk of sounding 14 years old, no offense if you're listening and are 14 years old, Fortnite has been my game, especially with the Doctor Doom season that they're doing right now. I think it's a lot of fun. I've been playing Outlaws too.
I don't play Fortnite, but Doctor Doom is my favorite Marvel character.
He's
Um,
so great.
he's never too far from my heart. This is him as infamous Iron Man. He stays on my desk. Yeah,
I almost
he's
bought
always
that
here.
exact same figure the other day. It's funny that you pull him up because I saw him and I was like, I really shouldn't buy another figure for my room right now. And now you pulling up that exact figure is like, maybe I should go back. Maybe that's my sign to go back and get him from my local comic book store.
My newest edition, she's still in the box, but I got the Dark Forces Rising Mara Jade. I was so
Nice.
stoked to get this.
My newest addition to my collection, let's see if I can grab it from back here. It's not a Star Wars figure. I actually have a video coming out about this on Friday. So if you're seeing this podcast before Friday, I don't know when this is dropping, but if it comes out
On
before
Friday.
Friday, then
So
I'm making a
after
video
this,
about
go check it
this.
out.
Thank you.
Nice.
But this is the Anakin Skywalker interactive lightsaber from 2002. And I always wanted it as a kid because I love the design of Anakin's lightsaber in episode 2, the one that gets destroyed on Geonosis.
Yeah.
And no one talks about it, but it's almost the exact same design as Darth Vader's. And this particular toy, it's plastic, but it's so chrome that like as a kid, I wanted it so bad and I never was able to get it. And the other day I went into my local comic book store and I saw this and I was like, oh my God, like that's it. Like I gotta get it. So 27-year-old me is happy that I have it. I know that 7-year-old me would be very happy if he knew that I had this right now. But I'm making a fun video about it. Just kind of a small fun video because I don't know how many people are going to care about me talking about a lightsaber. I at least was like, man, this could be fun to talk about on
Hey
the
man,
channel. So there's that.
this is lightsaber cruise is where it's at. By the way, this is a gorgeous work of art.
That's so cool. Is
Luke
that
Saber.
Luke's or Obi-Wan's?
Yeah, this is Luke's.
Nice. Let me see if I can grab it real quick. Let me see if I can find it. It's right here. I have this one. A friend gave it to me for Christmas one year. I have a Lego Death Star right up here out of frame. You can't see it. And the blade hit the Lego Death Star, and it almost knocked it off the shelf. But we're okay. But
That was almost
this is a
tragic.
NeoPixel one. And I love it. It's one that can, let's see if I can do it. It'll like change colors. I don't know if it'll pick it up,
Yeah,
but
mine
it's
is
so cool.
NeoPixel as well. It's set to red right now, but
Nice.
shout out to Master Allen, lightsabers. He's the goat.
Nice. I
But
want to learn some of the tricks. Like I see so many people, and this will be a future video too, but I want to learn the tricks to be cool because like little 7-year-old me did not know the tricks, and one of my best friends made fun of me for it. So the first trick I learned somewhat recently was the Anakin Obi-Wan spin
Yeah.
because a couple years back I lived with my parents back in like 2020 and they had COVID and I did not. And I remember I had to quarantine myself upstairs alone for like an entire week. So I just like binge watched a bunch of movies. And one of the days I was like, you know what? I've got nothing to do. I'm going to learn how to do like the spin, like behind my back and everything. And I finally learned how to do it. And I remember I sent a video of me doing it to my friend and I was like, you can't make fun of me anymore. It took me 2 decades, but I found a way to do it. So I finally learned how to be cool, just like Anakin and Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, I mean, the old viral video Star Wars kid walked so that we could all spend lightsabers and live our best life.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, I think that that wraps it up. But yeah, I mean, any final thoughts, and then also where can everyone find you and your content?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thank you so much for having me. I think I said it at the start. If not, I know I said it before we started recording, but it's awesome that you reached out to me, and I'm really thankful for it because I've been a fan of your stuff for quite some time now. I discovered your TikTok right after Rise of Skywalker came out, and I remember when everyone was being so negative about Rise of Skywalker, you were kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel, where I was like, okay, someone else at least if they don't like the movie, but at least I know that like they can still be respectful about Star Wars talk online. And so I really gravitated towards your stuff. So I was a little bit starstruck whenever you reached out to me, but thank you so much for having me on. In terms of where you can find me, I'm over on YouTube. Lightspeed is the channel. If you can't find it there, I think if you type in Lightspeed Skipper, it pops up. So I don't
Okay.
know why it's just the way it is, but I have a channel Lightspeed where I talk about Star Wars. You can find me on Twitter at JTimSuggs, and that's pretty much it for now. I'm working on a TikTok, but it's still very much in the works, so we'll see how that goes. But thank you again for having me on. I really appreciate it, and it's been really fun talking.
Yeah, always. And we'll also want to have you on Diet in the Force as well, where it's live and it's also relaxed and stuff. But we'll announce that when we get to it. But
I
yeah,
gotcha.
for anyone else who's watching, thank you guys for sticking around. Thanks for coming back after my brief hiatus for both good and bad reasons. But yeah, thank you so much, and may the Force be with you always.
May the Force be with you.